I never imagined that owning a commercial snow removal truck would turn me into the most hated person in Meadowbrook Estates. But here we are. My name is Patterson, and I learned the hard way that some people would rather watch their neighbors slip and break bones than tolerate a work vehicle parked in a driveway. It started on a crisp October morning in Westminster, Colorado. I had just closed on my house 2 months prior, a modest 3-bedroom ranch that cost me every penny of my savings plus a hefty mortgage. The neighborhood looked perfect when I toured it in August. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and a community pool I would probably never use. What I did not pay enough attention to was the thickness of that HOA packet my realtor handed me at closing. I skimmed it, saw the usual stuff about lawn heights and fence colors, signed where I needed to sign, and moved on with my life. My business, Patterson Snow Services, had been growing steadily for 3 years. I started with a beat-up pickup and a plow attachment, doing driveways for elderly folks in my old neighborhood. But last spring, I made the investment that would change everything. I bought a 2019 Ford F550 with a truck-mounted sander unit bolted to the bed. This beast could handle commercial lots, long driveways, and everything in between. The sander held 3 cubic yards of salt and sand mixture, and I could control the spread rate from inside the heated cab. It was not pretty, I will admit. The truck was white with rust spots starting to show through on the fenders, and the sander unit stood about 4 feet tall above the bed rails. But it was mine, paid for with honest work, and it was my ticket to landing bigger contracts. I parked it in my driveway that October morning after finishing a pre-season maintenance check. The truck fit entirely on my property, not blocking the sidewalk or hanging into the street. I was pretty proud of myself for finding a house with a driveway that could actually accommodate my work vehicle. My old apartment complex never let me park it there, so I had been renting a storage space across town for $200 a month. Now, I could save that money. 3 days later, I found the first notice tucked into my front door. It was printed on cream-colored cardstock with an embossed logo at the top that read, Meadowbrook Estates, Homeowners Association. The letter was signed by someone named Patricia Whitmore, HOA president. Dear resident, it began, with no personalization whatsoever. It has come to our attention that a commercial vehicle is being stored at your property located at 4782 Willow Creek Drive. Per Section 7.3 of the Meadowbrook Estates Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, no commercial vehicles may be parked in driveways or streets within the community for more than 4 hours within any 24-hour period. Please remove this vehicle immediately or face fines beginning at $50 per day. Sincerely, Patricia Whitmore, HOA President. I read it twice, then dug through the moving boxes still cluttering my garage until I found that HOA packet. Section 7.3 did exist, buried on page 47 of a 62-page document. But the wording was not as clear-cut as Patricia made it sound. It said commercial vehicles bearing visible business signage or markings could not be parked in view of the street for extended periods. My truck had no signs, no phone numbers, no business name painted anywhere on it. Sure, the sander unit made it obvious this was not your average pickup, but it was not technically bearing business signage. I decided to call the number listed at the bottom of the letter. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and nasal. Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, this is Patricia. Hi, Patricia. This is Patterson from 4782 Willow Creek. I got your letter about my truck and I wanted to discuss it. There is nothing to discuss, Mr. Patterson. The vehicle needs to be removed. Well, I actually read through Section 7.3 and my truck does not have any business signage on it. So technically, Mr. Patterson, she interrupted, her tone icing over, the spirit of the rule is quite clear. We do not allow commercial vehicles in this neighborhood. It brings down property values and creates an unsightly appearance. Other residents have already complained. Other residents. I have lived here for 2 months and barely talked to anyone besides my next-door neighbor, and he told me the truck was cool. Nevertheless, complaints have been filed. You have until Friday to remove the vehicle or fines will begin accruing. Good day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, absolutely floored by what just happened. This woman had not even pretended to consider my interpretation of the rules. She had decided I was wrong, and that was that. My next-door neighbor, an older guy named Tom who retired from teaching high school chemistry, came over that evening while I was grilling burgers. He had seen me outside and wandered over with a beer in hand. "Hey, Liam. How is it going? Been better. Got a nastogram from the HOA about my truck." Tom grimaced. "Yeah, Patricia Whitmore strikes again. That woman has nothing better to do than police the neighborhood. Last year she tried to fine the Hendersons because their daughter drew a hopscotch grid on their driveway with chalk. Said it was graffiti. You are kidding. I wish I was." She eventually backed down after about 15 people showed up to a board meeting to tell her she was being ridiculous. But she does not forget. The Hendersons got cited for having their trash cans visible from the street 3 weeks in a row after that incident. She drove by their house every Tuesday morning at 6:30 to catch them before they could roll the cans back. "That is insane." Tom shrugged. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Estates. My advice: do not engage with her directly. She will make your life miserable. Maybe try going to the next board meeting and asking for a variance or an exception. The board has 3 other members besides Patricia, and they are usually more reasonable." I thanked Tom for the advice and spent the next week researching my options. The next HOA board meeting was not until November 15th, which was after the Friday deadline Patricia had given me. I decided to send a certified letter to the HOA's official mailing address, explaining my position and requesting a hearing before the board. I kept the truck parked in my driveway. Friday came and went. The following Monday, another letter appeared at my door. This one informed me that I was being fined $50 per day, starting the previous Friday. 3 days meant $150 already. I was also given another deadline: remove the vehicle by November 1st, or the daily fine would increase to $100. I called a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Singh, and she specialized in HOA disputes. Her retainer was $1,500, which made me wince, but she seemed confident after I explained the situation. "The signage clause gives you a strong argument," she said. "HOAs have broad power, but they still have to follow their own rules as written. If the CCRs specifically mention signage and your vehicle has none, they are overreaching. I will draft a response and request that they cease the fines pending a board hearing." Rebecca's letter went out the next day. I felt a small surge of hope. Maybe this would all blow over, and I could just live my life and run my business in peace. That hope lasted about 48 hours. On Thursday afternoon, I came home from servicing a client's equipment to find a tow truck in my driveway. Not parked on the street, but actually in my driveway, backing up toward my F550. A short, stocky guy in a reflective vest was attaching chains to the front axle. "Whoa, whoa, whoa." I jumped out of my personal car and ran toward him. "What are you doing? That is my truck." The guy looked up, annoyed. "Got a work order to tow this vehicle. You the owner?" Yes, I am the owner and you do not have permission to take it. He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket and handed it to me. It was a tow authorization signed by Patricia Whitmore on behalf of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, claiming the vehicle was abandoned and in violation of community standards. This is insane. The truck is not abandoned. I drive it almost every day. And she does not have the authority to tow a vehicle from private property without my consent. The tow truck driver held up his hands. Look, man, I just do what the work order says. You got a problem, take it up with whoever called me. I am taking it up with you right now. Do not tow my truck. He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. You are going to have to call my dispatcher. I cannot just leave without either the vehicle or a damn good reason. I called Rebecca Singh right there in the driveway, putting her on speaker. She identified herself as my attorney and explained to the tow truck driver that the HOA did not have the legal authority to tow a vehicle from private property without following proper procedures, which included providing notice and an opportunity for a hearing. The driver, clearly not wanting to get caught in the middle of a legal battle, unhooked the chains and left. But I knew this was far from over. The next board meeting finally arrived on November 15th. It was held in the community clubhouse, a bland rectangular building near the neighborhood entrance. I arrived 15 minutes early with a folder full of documents, photos of my truck, a copy of the CCRs with Section 7.3 highlighted, and a letter from Rebecca outlining my legal position. About 20 other residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table where the board members sat. Patricia Whitmore was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, blonde hair teased into a stiff helmet, wearing a pink blazer over a white blouse. She had the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. The other board members were a younger guy named David Chen, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, an older woman named Margaret O'Reilly, who kept checking her phone, and a middle-aged man named Ron Sheffield, who seemed to be nodding off. Patricia called the meeting to order and rattled through the usual business. Treasurer's report, landscaping contract renewal, pool maintenance schedule for next summer. Then she got to new business. Item 4, she announced, looking directly at me. Ongoing violation at 4782 Willow Creek Drive. Mr. Patterson, would you like to address the board? I stood up, suddenly aware that everyone in the room was looking at me. Yes, thank you. I am Liam Patterson and I own the property in question. I am here because I believe the HOA is misinterpreting Section 7.3 of the CCRs. My vehicle does not bear any commercial signage, which is specifically what the rule prohibits. I use this truck for my snow removal business, and I need to park it somewhere. This is my home, my property, and the truck fits entirely within my driveway without obstructing any public areas. Patricia did not even wait for me to sit down before responding. Mr. Patterson, the intent of Section 7.3 is to prevent commercial vehicles from being stored in residential areas, period. The signage clause is just one example, not an exhaustive definition. Your truck is clearly a commercial vehicle. It has a massive sander unit attached to it that no personal vehicle would ever need. It is an eyesore, and multiple residents have complained about it lowering their property values. Can I ask which residents complained? I said. Because I have talked to my immediate neighbors, and none of them have an issue with it. Complaints are kept confidential to protect residents from retaliation. That is convenient, so I am supposed to just take your word that people are upset. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Patricia looked irritated but nodded at her. Hi, I am Jennifer Kowalski. I live on Willow Creek about 5 houses down from Mr. Patterson. I just want to say that I have seen the truck, and honestly, it does not bother me at all. I did not even notice it until Patricia started sending around emails about it. I think we have bigger issues in this neighborhood, like the fact that the speed bumps on Oakmont Drive are falling apart and someone is going to blow out their suspension. A few people murmured in agreement. Patricia's smile grew tighter. Thank you for your input, Jennifer, but this meeting is not a neighborhood forum. The board will make the final decision. Mr. Chen, what is your position? David Chen shifted uncomfortably. I think if the CCRs specifically mention signage, we should probably stick to that interpretation. Otherwise, what is stopping us from arbitrarily deciding what counts as a commercial vehicle? Does a contractor's pickup with a ladder rack count? What about a landscaper's trailer? Those would be temporary visits, not permanent storage, Patricia snapped. But the rule does not say anything about duration either, David countered. It just says vehicles with business signage. I think Mr. Patterson has a point. I could have hugged David Chen right then. Margaret O'Reilly finally looked up from her phone. I honestly do not care that much, but if we start letting people park commercial trucks, what is next? RVs, boats, semi-trucks. My truck is not a semi, I said. It is just a heavy-duty pickup. Plenty of people in this neighborhood drive F-250s and F-350s for personal use. Mine just happens to have equipment on it. Ron Sheffield, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly spoke up. Can we just vote and be done with this? I got a Broncos game starting in an hour. Patricia looked around the table. All in favor of upholding the violation and continuing fines against Mr. Patterson, say aye. Aye, Patricia said immediately. Margaret echoed her a second later. Ron mumbled something that might have been aye or might have been a belch. David Chen was the only one who said nay. 3-1, I lost. The violation stands, Patricia announced. Mr. Patterson, you have until December 1st to remove the vehicle, or the fines will continue and we will pursue further legal action, including potential foreclosure to recover unpaid fines. I could not believe what I was hearing. Foreclosure, over parking a truck in my own driveway. HOA liens can absolutely lead to foreclosure if violations are not remedied. I suggest you take this seriously. I walked out of that meeting shaking with anger. Rebecca Singh advised me that we could fight this in court, but it would take months and cost thousands in legal fees. The alternative was to rent a storage space again and eat the $200 per month, plus try to get the fines reversed. I chose to fight. I was not going to let Patricia Whitmore bully me out of using my own property for a legitimate purpose. Winter came early to Colorado that year. The first snow fell on November 20th, just a light dusting that melted by noon. But the forecast for late November showed a major storm system moving in from the northwest. My phone started ringing off the hook with clients wanting to book pre-storm treatments and post-storm clearing. I kept the truck in my driveway, racking up daily fines that I refused to pay. Rebecca filed a motion in Jefferson County District Court challenging the HOA's interpretation of the CCRs and requesting an injunction against the fines. The court date was set for January 8th, which meant I had to survive the holidays under Patricia's scrutiny. The big storm hit on November 27th, the day before Thanksgiving. 12 inches of heavy, wet snow blanketed the Denver metro area overnight. I was up at 3 in the morning, pre-treating parking lots for a strip mall in Arvada, then clearing a medical office complex in Broomfield. My phone buzzed constantly with requests. By noon, I had made $3,000 and was exhausted. When I finally returned to Meadowbrook Estates around 2 in the afternoon, I noticed something immediately. The neighborhood streets were a mess. The main roads in Westminster had been plowed hours ago, but inside our subdivision, nothing had been touched. The HOA was responsible for clearing the private streets within the community, but apparently they had not gotten around to it yet. I parked my truck in the driveway, now piled with snow that I would have to clear later, and trudged inside to collapse on the couch. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Patricia Whitmore to all Meadowbrook Estates residents. Dear neighbors, due to the unexpected severity of today's snowstorm, our contracted snow removal company is running behind schedule. Please be patient as they work to clear our streets. In the meantime, please avoid unnecessary travel and stay safe. Happy Thanksgiving. I almost laughed. Unexpected severity. Every weather station in Colorado had been screaming about this storm for 3 days. Thanksgiving Day was quiet. I heated up a frozen turkey dinner and watched football, too tired to drive anywhere. The neighborhood streets still had not been plowed by evening. I saw a few neighbors out trying to shovel the roadway in front of their houses, which was basically pointless given how much snow there was. Friday morning, I woke up to my doorbell ringing. I stumbled downstairs in sweatpants and a t-shirt to find Tom from next door standing on my porch, looking worried. Hey, Liam, have you been outside yet? No, why? The streets are still not plowed. And it is supposed to drop below 20 degrees tonight, which means all this slush is going to turn into a skating rink. A bunch of us are pretty upset. Patricia sent another email saying the contractor is still working on it, but I called the company directly, and they said the HOA never even contacted them to request service. Wait, what? Tom showed me his phone. He had forwarded an email chain between himself and someone at Mile High Snow Services, the company supposedly under contract with Meadowbrook Estates. The representative confirmed that they had a seasonal contract with our HOA, but stated they had not received any service requests for November 27th or 28th. So Patricia just lied to everyone, I said. Looks like it. Or she screwed up and is trying to cover. Either way, people are pissed. Mrs. Chen from 3 streets over slid into a mailbox trying to leave her driveway this morning, totaled her front bumper. I stood there processing this information. Then an idea started forming in my head, a probably stupid, definitely petty idea. I could clear the streets, I said. Tom blinked. I've got a truck with a sander. I cannot plow this much snow effectively without a dedicated plow rig, but I can lay down sand and salt to give people traction. It would not be perfect, but it would be a hell of a lot better than nothing. Would you really do that? Sure. I mean, I live here too. And honestly, it would be hilarious to see Patricia's face when she realizes the truck she has been trying to ban just saved everyone from breaking their necks. Tom grinned. I will help spread the word. Let people know you are doing this as a favor, not as a business thing, so Patricia can't claim you are running a commercial operation in the neighborhood. I spent the next hour prepping the truck and filling the sander with a mixture I had left over from a commercial job. Then I slowly drove through every street in Meadowbrook Estates, spreading sand and salt in careful, even passes. Neighbors came out of their houses to watch, some waving, others taking videos. A few people stopped me to say thank you. It took 3 hours to cover the entire neighborhood. By the time I finished, the streets were not completely clear, but they were safe enough to drive on. The sand provided traction, and the salt was already starting to melt through the icy layer that had formed overnight. I was pulling back into my driveway when a silver Lexus SUV screeched to a stop in front of my house. Patricia Whitmore jumped out, her face red, still wearing a bathrobe and slippers. She marched up to my truck as I climbed down from the cab. "What do you think you are doing?" she shrieked. "Making the streets safe. You are welcome, by the way. You do not have permission to operate a commercial vehicle within this neighborhood. This is a direct violation of I am not operating a business, Patricia. I am helping my neighbors. For free. Because the HOA failed to arrange proper snow removal like you are supposed to. That is not true. Our contractor was delayed. Funny, because Tom called them, and they said you never requested service. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. That is confidential HOA business. You have no right. People could have gotten hurt. They still might if we get more snow and you keep dropping the ball. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by Patricia's yelling. She seemed to realize she was making a scene and lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. You are going to regret this, Mr. Patterson. That truck is still in violation, and now you have used it for commercial purposes within the neighborhood, which is even worse. Expect a significant increase in your fines. She stomped back to her Lexus and peeled out, nearly losing control on a patch of ice I had not treated yet. I would have felt bad if she actually crashed, but she managed to correct and sped away. Jennifer Kowalski, the woman who had spoken up for me at the board meeting, approached with a smile. That was amazing. Thank you so much. My mom is visiting for the holidays and she uses a walker. There was no way she could navigate these streets before you cleared them. Happy to help. Patricia is going to make your life hell, you know. She already is. Might as well be for a good reason. The rest of November and early December were relatively quiet. I kept the truck parked in my driveway, continued racking up fines I had no intention of paying, and waited for the court date. We got a few smaller snow events, and each time, I treated the neighborhood streets. Patricia sent increasingly furious emails demanding that I stop, but she could not actually prevent me from driving on public streets, even private ones within the subdivision. David Chen resigned from the HOA board in mid-December. He sent a mass email to all residents explaining that he could not in good conscience continue serving alongside Patricia, whose authoritarian approach and disregard for reasonable compromise made the board ineffective. His resignation left the board short of a quorum, which meant they could not hold official votes until a replacement was appointed. Patricia tried to appoint someone herself, but several residents, emboldened by David's public resignation, showed up to the next meeting to argue that the community should vote on the replacement. It turned into a shouting match that ended with Patricia storming out and Margaret O'Reilly crying. Ron Sheffield just sat there eating peanuts from a bag he brought. Then, on December 17th, everything changed. I was at Home Depot buying supplies when my phone rang. It was Tom. Liam, you need to come home right now. What happened? Patricia Whitmore just fell on the ice in front of the clubhouse. Ambulance is here. It looks bad. I drove back to Meadowbrook Estates with a knot in my stomach. Emergency vehicles were parked outside the clubhouse, lights flashing. A crowd of residents stood nearby, talking in hushed tones. I found Tom near the back of the group. What happened exactly? I asked. She was walking to her car after some kind of meeting. There is a patch of ice right by the front door that no one treated. She slipped and went down hard. I heard she might have broken her hip. I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. I did not like Patricia. She had made my life miserable for months, but I did not want her seriously hurt either. The paramedics loaded her into the ambulance a few minutes later. Her face was pale, twisted in pain. Her husband, a quiet man I had only seen a handful of times, climbed in beside her. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing. People started to disperse. I walked over to the clubhouse entrance to look at the area where she fell. There was indeed a large patch of black ice right in front of the door, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The clubhouse parking lot had not been treated at all. In fact, now that I looked around, I realized the neighborhood streets had not been treated either. We had gotten 2 inches of snow the previous night, not enough for me to justify doing a full run with my truck, but enough to create hazardous conditions when it melted and refroze. Margaret O'Reilly was standing near her car, looking shaken. I approached her carefully. "Is she going to be okay?" I asked. Margaret looked at me like she did not quite recognize me at first. "I don't know," she could not stand up. She was in so much pain. "Why was not the parking lot treated? Or the streets?" "I do not know," Margaret said, her voice breaking. Patricia handles all the contractor relationships. After the Thanksgiving thing, she said she was going to find a new company, but I do not think she ever did. I asked her about it last week, and she said it was under control. So no one has been treating the neighborhood at all, except me. Margaret just shook her head and got in her car. That evening, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Someone had posted about Patricia's fall, and the comments ranged from expressions of concern to outright anger that the HOA had failed to maintain safe conditions. Several people pointed out that the only reason the residential streets were remotely passable was because I had been treating them on my own. Then Jennifer Kowalski posted something that made my blood run cold. My mother fell on the ice in front of her house 3 days ago. She did not tell me how bad it was because she did not want to worry me. She finally went to urgent care today and they found a hairline fracture in her wrist. This is unacceptable. The HOA is collecting our dues every month and they can't be bothered to keep us safe. Other comments followed. An elderly man on Oakmont Drive had fallen and gotten a concussion. A woman on Sycamore Lane twisted her ankle so badly she had to use crutches. A teenager slipped in his own driveway and chipped a tooth. All within the past 2 weeks. All because the neighborhood had not been properly maintained. I was reading through the comments when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello, Mr. Patterson." A woman's voice, weak and strained. It took me a moment to recognize it. "Patricia." "Yes." There was a long pause filled with ragged breathing. "I am calling from the hospital. They say I broke my hip. I need surgery." "I am sorry to hear that. I hope you recover quickly." Another pause, then quietly, "I need your help." I almost dropped the phone. "What?" "The neighborhood. The streets. I know you have been taking care of them. I need you to keep doing it. Officially. The HOA will pay you." "Patricia, you have spent months trying to find me into submission and threatening foreclosure. Why would I help you now?" Her voice cracked. "Because I screwed up. I was so focused on getting rid of your truck that I let everything else fall apart. I never hired a new snow removal company after Thanksgiving. I kept meaning to, but I was busy with the legal stuff against you, and I just kept putting it off. And now people are getting hurt. Please. I will drop all the fines. I will leave you alone about the truck. Just please keep the neighborhood safe." I sat in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I was hearing. Patricia Whitmore, the woman who had made my life a living hell, was literally calling me from a hospital bed to beg for help. "Let me think about it," I said finally. "Mr. Patterson, please." I said I will think about it. I hung up. Tom came over later that night bringing a 6-pack of beer. We sat in my living room and I told him about the call. "So what are you going to do?" he asked. "I have no idea. Part of me wants to tell her to go to hell, but people are getting hurt and that is not their fault." "You have already been helping for free. Might as well get paid for it." "Yeah, but if I agree to this, am I just letting her off the hook? She needs to face consequences for how badly she mismanaged things." Tom took a long pull from his beer. "I think Patricia is facing consequences right now. Broken hip, surgery, months of recovery. Plus, everyone in the neighborhood knows she screwed up. Her reputation is destroyed. If you really want to twist the knife, you could go to the next board meeting and demand her resignation as part of the deal. I stared at him. That is kind of brilliant. I have my moments. The emergency HOA board meeting was called for December 20th. Margaret O'Reilly sent out the notice, explaining that they needed to address the snow removal situation immediately. I showed up with a written proposal. I would provide snow removal and ice treatment services for Meadowbrook Estates for the remainder of the winter season at a rate of $500 per treatment, on call as needed. In exchange, all fines against me would be dropped. I would be allowed to park my truck at my property without restriction. And Patricia Whitmore would resign as HOA president. The meeting was packed. At least 50 residents showed up, cramming into the clubhouse. Margaret and Ron were at the board table. Patricia was obviously absent. Margaret looked exhausted, like she had not slept in days. "Mr. Patterson has submitted a proposal for snow removal services," Margaret said, her voice shaky. "Given the recent events, I think we need to seriously consider it. Does anyone have questions or comments?" A man I did not recognize stood up. "Why should we hire him? He is not a licensed snow removal company." "Actually, I am," I said, standing. Patterson Snow Services is a registered LLC in the state of Colorado. I carry full liability insurance and have contracts with several commercial properties in the area. I can provide references if needed. Jennifer Kowalski raised her hand. "I think we should hire him. He has been taking care of our streets for free for weeks while the HOA did nothing. My mom could have been seriously hurt if not for him." Several people voiced agreement. The man who questioned me sat down, looking embarrassed. Margaret cleared her throat. "There is one other condition in Mr. Patterson's proposal. He is asking that Patricia Whitmore resign as president." The room erupted. Some people were shocked, others were nodding vigorously. Ron Sheffield, of all people, spoke up. "Honestly, I think that is fair. Patricia screwed up big time. We all know it. Maybe it is time for new leadership." "We can't just force her out," Margaret protested weakly. "She has been president for 6 years. She can resign voluntarily or we can start a recall petition," someone called from the back. "Either way, she needs to go." Margaret looked like she might cry again. "This is not how I wanted this to happen." "None of us wanted any of this to happen," I said, more gently than I felt. "But here we are. Patricia made decisions that put people at risk. She needs to take responsibility for that." The board voted. Margaret abstained, clearly conflicted. Ron voted yes. Without a third board member, they technically did not have a quorum to make it official, but the message was clear. Margaret agreed to call Patricia and relay the board's decision. 2 days later, Patricia Whitmore submitted her resignation via email. It was brief, almost curt. "Due to health reasons, I am resigning as HOA president effective immediately. Margaret O'Reilly will assume the role of interim president until a special election can be held." The fines against me were officially rescinded. I signed a contract with the HOA to provide snow removal services through March, and my truck stayed parked in my driveway, exactly where it belonged. Christmas came and went. I spent it with my parents in Colorado Springs, grateful for a few days away from Meadowbrook Estates. When I returned, the neighborhood felt different. People waved when I drove by. A few neighbors dropped off cookies or gift cards to thank me for keeping the streets safe. The court date in January was canceled since the HOA had dropped all actions against me. Rebecca Singh sent me a final bill that was less than I expected, along with a note congratulating me on the outcome. Patricia Whitmore's recovery was slow. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had complications from the surgery and needed a second procedure. Her husband had to take family leave from work to care for her. I did not feel good about any of that, but I did not feel guilty either. She had created this situation through her own stubbornness and mismanagement. In February, we got the biggest snowstorm of the season. 22 inches fell over 36 hours, shutting down most of the Denver metro area. I worked around the clock, clearing commercial properties, and then coming back to treat Meadowbrook Estates multiple times as the snow kept falling. My invoice to the HOA for that storm alone was $3,000, and they paid it without question. Margaret O'Reilly turned out to be a decent president, or at least a more reasonable one than Patricia. She actually listened when people brought concerns to the board. She was not perfect, but she was not a tyrant either. The special election was held in March, and a guy named Kevin Murphy won. He was a younger dad with 2 kids, worked in IT, seemed level-headed. I did not know him well, but he had never given me trouble about my truck, which was good enough for me. One evening in late March, as the snow was finally starting to melt for good, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Patricia Whitmore standing on my porch. She was leaning on a cane, moving carefully. She looked older than I remembered, frailer. "Can I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She hobbled into my living room and eased herself onto the couch with a grimace. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "I was wrong. About the truck, about the way I treated you, all of it. I let my personal feelings override my common sense and people got hurt because of it." I did not know what to say, so I just nodded. I have spent the last 3 months in physical therapy, barely able to walk. I have had a lot of time to think about why I acted the way I did. She looked down at her hands. I think I was trying to control something I could not really control. My kids are grown and moved away. My husband works 60 hours a week. I retired early from my job and did not know what to do with myself. The HOA gave me a sense of purpose, I guess, a way to feel important, but I took it too far. I turned into the kind of person I used to hate. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserved better, and because I want you to know that I am not fighting the recall anymore. I am done with the HOA. I am going to focus on recovering and maybe finding a healthier way to spend my time. Volunteer work, maybe. Something that actually helps people instead of making their lives harder." She stood up slowly, wincing. "Anyway, that is all I wanted to say. I will let myself out." I walked her to the door, still processing. As she stepped onto the porch, she turned back. "For what it is worth, your truck does not bother me anymore. I actually feel safer knowing you can treat the streets when we need it." Then she was gone, limping down the driveway to her Lexus. I stood in my doorway for a long time after she left, watching the last patches of snow melt in my yard. Spring was coming. The nightmare of the past few months was finally over. Tom wandered over a few minutes later, apparently having seen Patricia leave. "What was that about?" she apologized. "No kidding. Did hell freeze over?" Maybe it did. She seemed genuine, though. I think breaking her hip really rattled her. Good. Maybe she will think twice before harassing people over stupid stuff. We stood in my driveway, looking out at the neighborhood. Kids were riding bikes on the now clear streets. Someone was grilling in their backyard, the smell of charcoal and meat drifting on the breeze. It felt normal, peaceful, like a neighborhood should feel. "You sticking around?" Tom asked. "Or is this place too traumatic now?" I laughed. "I will stick around. I've got a mortgage to pay, and honestly, most of the people here are pretty decent. It was really just Patricia causing problems." "Fair enough. Hey, my wife and I are having a barbecue next weekend if you want to come. Nothing fancy, just burgers and beer." "I will be there." The rest of spring and summer passed uneventfully, which was exactly what I needed. My business continued to grow. I landed a major contract with a property management company that oversaw 3 shopping centers, which meant steady work and reliable income. I even hired a part-time employee, a younger guy named Marcus who was studying business at Community College of Denver and needed flexible hours. The neighborhood settled into a comfortable rhythm. Kevin Murphy ran the HOA with a light touch, focusing on actual issues like repairing roads and maintaining common areas rather than policing every tiny violation. The board meetings became boring again, which everyone agreed was a good thing. I did see Patricia around the neighborhood occasionally. She was still recovering, still using the cane, but she seemed different, quieter. She would wave if we made eye contact, but she did not try to talk to me again. I heard from Jennifer that Patricia had started volunteering at a senior center in Westminster, helping coordinate activities and meals. It suited her better than being HOA president ever did. In October, almost a year after the whole ordeal began, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the HOA, but from a law firm in Denver. My heart sank, assuming it was some new legal threat I did not know about. But when I opened it, I found something completely unexpected. It was a notice that Patricia Whitmore had listed her house for sale. As part of the sales process, her attorney was notifying me that she was formally withdrawing any and all past complaints, violations, or legal actions related to my property. It was essentially a legal house cleaning, making sure there were no lingering issues that could complicate her sale. Attached was a handwritten note on personal stationery. Mr. Patterson, my husband and I have decided to move to Arizona to be closer to our daughter and grandchildren. The winters here are too hard on my hip, and honestly, I think a fresh start will be good for both of us. I hope this letter provides you with closure as well. Thank you for keeping the neighborhood safe, even when I made it difficult. Best wishes, Patricia Whitmore. I read the note twice, then filed it away with all the other documents from the past year. It felt like the final chapter of a book I was ready to finish. Tom and his wife hosted another barbecue that weekend, an end-of-season party before the weather turned cold again. I brought Marcus along, and we ate too much food and drank too many beers and laughed at stupid jokes. Jennifer was there with her mom, who was doing much better after her wrist healed. Kevin Murphy stopped by with his kids, who immediately commandeered Tom's backyard for an improvised soccer game. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, people started drifting home. I helped Tom clean up the backyard, hauling trash bags to the curb and folding up chairs. "You think this winter will be as crazy as last year?" Tom asked. "God, I hope not." "Well, at least we are prepared this time." "You have got the contract locked in. The HOA actually has their act together, and Patricia is moving to Arizona." "Do not jinx it," Tom laughed. "Fair enough." I drove home that night feeling content in a way I had not felt in a long time. My truck was parked in my driveway exactly where it was supposed to be. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. The stars were out, sharp and clear in the cold autumn air. Winter did come, of course. It always does in Colorado. We got our first snow in early November. Nothing major, just enough to remind everyone that the easy season was over. I treated the neighborhood streets as part of my contract. No drama, no complaints, just honest work, fairly paid. The special election brought in 2 new board members to fill the vacant seats. Both were younger families who wanted the HOA to focus on maintenance and community building rather than enforcement and fines. The annual dues actually went down slightly because the new board renegotiated some of the service contracts and eliminated wasteful spending. Patricia's house sold in December to a nice couple from California who were relocating for work. They had a golden retriever that became the neighborhood's unofficial mascot, wandering from yard to yard collecting pets and treats. I met them a few weeks after they moved in, and they mentioned they had specifically asked about the HOA during the buying process. Their realtor had told them about the leadership change and how much the community had improved in the past year. They said it was one of the reasons they chose Meadowbrook Estates. I thought about that conversation a lot. How one person's rigidity and need for control had nearly destroyed the community, and how her departure had allowed it to heal and grow. It was not a happy story, exactly. People had gotten hurt, including Patricia herself. But it was a real story, messy and complicated, the way real life usually is. Marcus turned out to be a great employee. By the end of his first winter, he was handling jobs on his own, and I was able to take on even more clients. I bought a second truck in the spring, a newer F450 with lower mileage, and let Marcus use the old F550. Business was booming. The second winter in Meadowbrook Estates was everything the first winter was not. Smooth, professional, drama-free. I treated the streets after every snowfall. The HOA paid my invoices on time. No one complained about my truck. No one fell and broke their hip. It was boring. It was perfect. On a cold February evening, almost a year and a half after the whole nightmare began, I was sitting in my living room working on invoices when my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Someone had tagged me in a post in the Meadowbrook Estates group. It was Jennifer Kowalski, sharing a photo she had taken during the last snowstorm. In the picture, my truck was making a pass down Willow Creek Drive, the sander spraying a perfect arc of sand and salt behind it. She had captioned it, "Grateful for neighbors who actually care about keeping us safe." Thanks, Liam Patterson. The post had dozens of likes and comments. People thanking me, sharing their own stories of slipping on ice in other neighborhoods they had lived in, expressing appreciation for how well-maintained Meadowbrook Estates had become. I sat there reading through the comments, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire I had going in the fireplace. This was why I started my business in the first place. Not to make tons of money or build some empire, but to help people. To provide a service that actually mattered, especially for elderly folks and families with kids who just needed to get to school and work safely. Patricia had tried to take that away from me, not because I was doing anything wrong, but because she could not see past her own narrow view of how things should be. She had paid a heavy price for that stubbornness. But in the end, the community had survived. It had actually gotten stronger. I replied to Jennifer's post with a simple "happy to help," then went back to my invoices. Outside, snow was falling again, light and steady. I would need to do another treatment run in the morning. The forecast called for 3 to 5 inches overnight. I went to bed that night listening to the quiet hiss of snow against the windows. My truck parked in the driveway, ready for whatever came next. No drama, no threats. No HOA president trying to destroy my livelihood. Just me, my business, and a neighborhood that had finally learned the difference between rules that protect people and rules that just feed someone's need for control. It was not the story I expected when I bought my house in Meadowbrook Estates. But it was the story I got, and in the end, it turned out okay. Sometimes that is the best you can hope for. You face down the bullies, you stand your ground, you help people when they need it, and eventually things work out. Or at least, they work out well enough. And well enough is pretty damn good.